The Waco History Podcast is sponsored by Brotherwell Brewery on historic Bridge Street in Waco.
Cross the Brazos at Waco, ride hard and I'll make it by dawn. Cross the Brazos at Waco, I'm safe when I...
Welcome to the Waco History Podcast. I'm Mike Hamilton with Rogue Media Network. We're very proud to be the new home of the Waco History Podcast and hope to do Randy proud now that he has moved on. As always, your host, Dr. Stephen Sloan of Baylor's Institute of Oral History, is helping us all learn Waco's known and unknown stories. Welcome back for part 2 of Dr. Sloan's interview with former city manager Larry Groth.
Cross the Brazos at Waco, ride hard and I'll make it by dawn. Cross the Brazos at Waco, I'll walk straight in old San Antone.
But you're going to get pulled back in to working for the city. I know that's the next kind of job transition, assistant city manager. So how did you make that decision that you want to kind of go back in? I mean, you're still working in conjunction with the city.
Yes.
But how did you make that decision to kind of step back into a role like that?
Well, actually, one of my long-term friends and coworker, Wiley Stem, who just retired as city manager.
Uh-huh.
He was an assistant for me. He was actually an assistant city manager at that time. And Wiley was in utilities. And so in the 80s, when we were doing all those water projects, sewer projects, I mean, he was right there. And so we developed a good relationship. And I can't remember. I think I was coming out of City Hall and steps City Hall, and Wiley was coming up, and he said, "Hey, Larry." I mean, it was just, kind of, he said, "City manager's going to hire another assistant. We think you'd be good at it." Kathy Rice, who was the city manager at that time, Wiley mentioned me, and Kathy just, "Well, you just go try to convince him to come back up here. And I know it's going to be hard because he loves it down there." Wiley asked me if I'd be interested. And I said, "Well, let me think about it." And it just was, it seemed like a good opportunity, again, doing something a little bit different. And I felt at that time, I'd been to the zoo 5 years. That was 2000. Had done those projects we talked about. I think gave the zoo some stability, developed a lot of contacts, had a lot of people supporting the zoo. Mm-hmm. But I felt it was time not only for me to move, but I felt it was time for the zoo director to be what I would consider a zoo professional, mm-hmm. who had training. I mean, mine was on the job, mm-hmm. and that could make some decisions probably better than I could, particularly concerning animal welfare or animal exhibits or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I just thought it was a good time for me and the zoo. And it's always good to pick those times when the parting is beneficial to both parties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you talked about it in your oral history interview about, planning for animal population sizes and acquisitions of animals, and just that level of challenges that particularly a maturing zoo faces that would be different than in, say, in 94 or 95, different problems that you're dealing with. Yeah. Okay, and so you transition in, so this is the third assistant city manager. They're adding a third. Is that the?
Actually, we're adding a fourth.
Adding a fourth. Okay.
Right. I was the fourth.
You were the fourth. Mm-hmm. And what were your areas as you came on board? What were your areas of responsibility?
I had, luckily, departments that I was pretty familiar with.
Okay.
I had engineering, traffic, building inspection. Trying to think what else. Something else. One other area I think that were kind of in the construction area, public works kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So it was, I was familiar with all my areas and had good relationships with all the the department directors, and so it was an easy transition.
Okay, good. Well, one thing I know you're working on then, and I've been wanting to ask you about this. Talk to me about Waco water, municipal water, and just because I know water quality is
Quality standpoint?
Yeah, from a quality standpoint,
Yeah.
and that I know that's a persistent issue that's been a challenge, or has been challenging.
It has been challenging.
Yeah,
for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, we did pretty good with treatment and
Mm-hmm.
capacity and distribution, but we were having some water quality problems.
Yeah.
That
Talk
were-
a little bit about that,
Okay,
if you
back
would.
in the
Yeah.
started back in the 90s, and we had people that were working on it. Wiley, did I mention Wiley
Mhm.
Stem? He was really a lead on trying to clean. What his problem was we had a tremendous amount of nitrogen and phosphorus coming down the North Bosque. From up North Bosque goes up in Erath County.
Mhm.
And in the late 80s, early 90s, that whole area had a boom of dairy farm. Dairy farms have a tendency to kind of move around. and they really, the number of dairy cattle just really spiked. And so typically, they do a lot of things to try to take care of it, but there's always runoff. When it rains, it doesn't matter. You spread the stuff, and it just gets in the receiving stream can assimilate a lot
Mhm.
of those nutrients.
Mhm.
But at some point, it gets more than the receiving stream can assimilate. So it's traveling down pretty far when you think about it. But by the time it gets to our lake, they're all in there. That heavy load of nitrogen and phosphorus are there, which is just a feeding ground for algae. And so we started getting these tremendous algae blooms. Then we pull the water, in a raw water line off the lake to go to the treatment plant. We have a treatment plant down at Riverside, which is University Parks,
Mhm.
and we have one at Mount Carmel on Lake Shore. And unfortunately, now you kind of think about, well, okay, it's in there, you're just going to treat it out. But we were getting this taste and odor problem. These little algae guys were traumatized. When you pick them up and pump them down this pipe, by the time they get treatment plant, they die. And they give off this substance called geosmin. And that's the taste and odor.
Okay.
And unfortunately, once it gets there, very, very hard for a traditional treatment plant to get rid of it.
Hmm.
In fact, we would actually have algae blooms at the treatment plant in the basins, which is even worse.
Yeah.
So we wrestled with that. Wiley actually was kind of lead on that, working with TCEQ to try to institute stricter requirements, and we did. It took a long time, but
So these are stricter upstream requirements.
Yeah, try to stop these nutrient load before it gets to us.
Mm-hmm.
But it became obvious, and that was a big, kind of like we're talking about water and streets back in the 80s. I mean, in 2000, it was taste of water.
Mm-hmm.
Restaurants were not being able to serve it, because customers didn't want to drink it, and they had bottled water and all this kind of stuff, and it was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So as much as we worked on the North Bosque, and we have made tremendous gains, really, much better. We still had that problem, still loading, and so we had a kind of a pre-treatment plant built right below the dam that uses a system of air flotation that before it goes to treatment, you float all that stuff up and skim it off. And by the time when the water comes out, it comes in really bad looking. When the time it leaves that point, it's looking pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
You do a little bit of treatment with it too, with some chlorination. So when it gets to the treatment plant, then the load is less, and so the treatment plant at Mount Carmel and Riverside can do a better job of treating that water. And that was a $40 million fix, so it wasn't cheap.
Yeah.
And politically, it was tough. We had a lot of opposition about putting that plant in that location. You know, you always want to shove it out somewhere.
Yeah.
But the nature of that beast was it had to be as close as possible so that we could grab that algae and pull it off before it died, so we didn't have the geosmin problem.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, people around there, that's not their problem. I mean, they went there, and we had some really tough city hall type meetings, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever you call them, with the public, and I took a tremendous amount of heat on that, and just some vicious attacks. But we knew it was right, and luckily, a lot of times councils, that's voters out there.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
But they hung tight.
Mm.
That council that voted on that, we got that going. I'm really proud of them, because that's hard to do.
Yeah.
But they stuck up. Virginia Dupuy was the mayor at the time, and she was very supportive, and they all knew it needed to be done. We convinced them that from an engineering standpoint, that was the place for it to be, which kind of helped with my engineering background. In that position,
Mm-hmm.
I could talk with some intelligence, but it didn't need to go. And all the fears that were expressed didn't come true. That's the beauty of it.
So to tell
once
me,
we built it and opened, I got no complaints.
yeah. So tell me what the fears were. What were the fears?
Light, pollution,
Yeah.
smell, just ruining the looks
Yeah.
of that area. But we went to great pains in camouflaging that thing, and most of it's underground anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Traffic, sewage spills, just pretty much anything with a sewer treatment plant, because they looked at it more as a sewer treatment plant
Mm-hmm.
as a water treatment plant.
Yeah.
And in some sense, we were scooping off some bad stuff. Otherwise, it looks pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
But it's works. It's a real low maintenance plant. We don't have to assign a lot of employees to it, and it's just been great. Within months after we instituted that, our taste and odor complaints went to zero. I'd go to a restaurant and I'd ask for a glass of that good Waco water and bring it out. And
So about when did that go online? The new. I know I'm testing your memory.
it was
2000.
it was early in my city manager career, so
Okay.
it was probably 2004 or 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was great. It was great. It to me, it was another one of those. It was a real victory for the city.
Mm-hmm. It seems like, to address the issue, you don't have a lot of options, right? You can't address the pollution issue upstream. You can address the treatment. Was the expansion of the lake one way to try to address that issue, or was
No.
that separate?
That was separate. That
Okay.
was a quantity issue.
Okay.
Yeah, the lake, and that's again some really forward thinking city people. Back in the 70s, I guess, or maybe even in the 60s. I'm not sure when we got agreement with the Corps of Engineers to raise the lake 7 feet, and actually set a price whenever we wanted to do it. Basically, that this is what would happen, and we would pay for anything that needed to be moved or redone.
So that agreement was already in place.
That was in place.
Wow.
That was in
Just
place.
waiting to be
Just
activated.
waiting for us to need it. And during that time, we started. We had some droughts, some fairly significant, that really dropped the lake levels everywhere. People really scrambling for water, and we got that in, and were able to raise the lake. Kind of ahead of some of those droughts, and we never really we didn't have to. You didn't see a bunch of conservation measures going in and us telling we're water rationing, all kind of stuff, because we had the water and a good source for 50 years. I mean, it was wonderful. It was wonderful. We had to buy a lot of did a lot of habitat mitigation where it went up, and so it was a tough project. Wiley Stem was a lead on that.
Mm-hmm.
Did a great job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it added. You said it went 7 feet up. So
Seven.
you remember how much capacity it added?
About 20,000 acre feet.
Okay. Wow.
And I tell you, if you had to go out and buy that in that day and time,
Mm-hmm.
that was $100 million. Be $100 million. I mean, it cost us $30 million, which sounds like a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
It is a lot of money.
Yeah.
But for what we bought, I mean, it saved us $100 to $150 million trying to get that, either buy it from somebody, or at one time we were actually thinking about building another lake upstream, and it's so expensive and it's so hard to do. I mean, with the environmental issues and the concerns, you just don't see lakes being built.
Yeah.
It's just too hard and too expensive.
Yeah.
So we were very fortunate that we were able to, raise the lake and not have to do any structural changes to the dam.
Mm-hmm. What was the you talked about the kind of the stipulations for raising the lake level were already in place. What were the factors that led to them go ahead and pushing to do the project?
Just looking at the availability of water.
Okay.
We were doing a lot of forecasting with the potential growth, and knowing that it's people are coming to Texas.
Mm-hmm.
They like, and that's the limiting factor for cities. People coming in, either just individuals or businesses, is water.
Mm-hmm.
And so by doing that, I think the city positioned itself real well for future development.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah, you mentioned in your oral history when drought hit. I think in 2010 was around kind of about 10 years ago. We had we had a real extended drought that lasted to recent memory. That seemed had a lot of foresight then. It seems like you predicted the future. Y'all predicted the future a bit.
Sometimes you're just lucky.
Okay. Well, you're assistant city manager, then the opportunity opens up for you to become the man. And so talk a little bit about kind of that decision and that opportunity, how it presented itself.
Well, I had worked under 4 city managers.
Mm-hmm.
When I was hired, David Smith was the city manager, and he was long-term. He was like 17 years. That's the longest city manager ever.
Yeah.
In the city.
Yeah.
10 years of city managers are 3 to 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
By then the councils start changing. You lose favor for some reason. You do a few things, make people mad, and you just you get where you're not in favor.
Mm-hmm.
So after David, we had 3 city managers. All of them were averaged at 4 to 5 years, and it was about that time for Kathy Rice, who was the city manager, and she resigned, and then they appointed me as an interim, like in January of 2003, I believe, and then made it permanent in April of that year. And it just asked me how the decision making on that.
Yeah.
I was at a point in my career that I just didn't want to work for another city manager that was coming from some place that we didn't know about and have to get used. I just thought.
Yeah, because you knew it would have been an outside person.
Yeah, it would have been. Yeah. And I just I decided that maybe I just give it a shot, and I had great support. I mean, I worked for the city for 34 years, and by then, I was a city manager for 11, so I'd worked for a long time and really developed a lot of relationships in the community. In some cases, they thought they raised me up,
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have that kind of support of people, they want to see you succeed, and I felt like that would be the case, and I could call on a lot of different people if I needed some help. I'd worked with the council a lot. I knew all of them. They were, not only good council members, but they were friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew we could work together. I had a good staff. some really good assistants, great department heads that knew what they were supposed to do and did it. And I had full confidence that we would be successful.
Mm-hmm. So. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of projects you're going to be involved in over the next 11 years while you're in that position, which, as you point out, that's a long shelf life for a city manager.
It is.
Yeah, I don't know if you had an idea going into it how
no.
long. No.
In fact, my poor wife, we knew it just, city manager, it's a 24/7. I mean, you're just going to get calls, when you're Friday night was our date night, and somebody's always either, if we were out somewhere to see you and want to come talk to you about city business or call, and it's one thing for me, but spouses put up with a lot. They don't see you a lot at times, and so I promised them that, look, the previous 3 lasted it's going to be 4 years, so don't worry about it. It's not going to be that long, and it just kept kind of going and going. And it turned out that I became the second longest tenured city manager after David, but a lot of that was, I just think, was my being born here, growing up here, the relationships, and people were just extremely supportive, and I didn't get a lot of criticism, backbiting kind of stuff. Counselors were very supportive.
Mm-hmm. Now, just some people listening that may not kind of understand Waco's structure as far as its municipal structure, talk a little bit about that, kind of where the city manager role fits in the kind of governance.
We have what's called a city manager form of government, which means the council and mayor. We have 5 council members and a mayor. The mayor's, leads everything, but when it gets down to voting, he has one vote like everybody else. He sets the agendas, but the council's, work in that too. But they set policy. They're not involved in day-to-day operations. That's what city manager does. So city manager is kind of like a CEO, and they're his board. They set the goals. They set the priorities. They set the budgets, and then the city manager is expected to take care of it. Now they have 4 people work for the council: the city manager, the city attorney, city secretary, and I'm losing somebody. That's awful. They're gonna. Let's see. Yeah, city manager, city attorney, city secretary, and municipal judge.
There you go.
Yeah, we don't work a lot with municipal judge. That's kind
of, I understand.
The others I work with a lot.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so they hire and fire us, those 4, and they can direct us. As a council, a single council member can't. Mayor really can't. I mean, it's any direction that's given to the city manager needs to come through a council meeting. And so then I take the 1,500 people that work for the city, and through my assistants and through the directors, we do what's necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now as assistant city manager, how many people were working under you then? I
don't know, probably 150 maybe.
Okay, yeah. So exponentially increased with this, and but you had some experience managing people. I mean, you'd had kind of this history going back of being able to manage people, and as you pointed out, you had kind of pre-existing relationships that you could draw on, and in doing this management. As you came on as city manager, again, you don't have to get up to speed on what Waco needs, but what were some things that you felt were priorities? We've already talked about some of them, water quality. But what were some other ones?
Development downtown. That was real big.
Okay, now
and economic development in general.
Okay,
that was I probably spent more time on that than downtown development.
Okay, well let's start on downtown to begin with, just because I want to put us on a bit of a continuum here with downtown, because we talked about the travails of the 70s and 80s. In the 90s, some opportunities start to present themselves downtown, and so how does that narrative kind of start with downtown revitalization? What were some things you think about?
It's slow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just slow. You have to get some small victories. You also have to have what I call pioneers. People that see that there is an opportunity, but they also know there's a high percentage of failure.
Mm-hmm.
But they're willing to invest. That's the key. You got, the city government, county government. There's just so much we can do. We can try to facilitate, do the public infrastructure that's necessary, but at some point it's private investment. And like you said, you started seeing some things in the 90s and early 2000s. We started seeing some slow growth, and some that area across from City Hall, whatever that's called, I can't remember. But
the old cotton warehouses that are across from City
there,
Hall.
They started developing restaurants and different things.
And that happens in the late 90s, I think, doesn't it?
Late 90s, late 90s or
Mm-hmm.
early 2000. And so you start seeing that. Actually started seeing a few businesses on Austin
Mm-hmm.
taking off. We had some city land both across Washington and across 3rd Street that was available. And we put it out, and we got some apartments built down there that pretty well are occupied by students.
Mm-hmm.
And, and Baylor students, majority. And you get students that have some
Disposable
money,
income.
disposable income.
They have my money and your money.
Yeah, that's
is
right.
it?
As disposable income. And so people start seeing that, and all of a sudden you get a few more retail things, and it's just kind of a snowball.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that was important with downtown, I may be skipping a little bit, was just we had a lot of other city needs. And I mean, I'm not, if you want me to talk about it now, or we're going to keep on downtown. I mean,
Well, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, the downtown, I think, kind of tied in to some other things we were trying to do, and that was we had a huge backlog of capital needs, park system, police, Ranger Hall of Fame, convention center, libraries. Those are primary.
Mm-hmm.
And we worked real hard with the community to get a bond issue passed, and we did that in 2007, I think. And for me, it was like that. I love movies. The Apollo 13 movie, where the guy says failure is not an option. I use that. Oh, I said failure's not. I mean, we cannot fail. The city hadn't passed a bond issue in 40 years, and I mean, you just can't have a failure. And so we worked real hard as a community and narrowed down the projects and got it passed every issue, and then had some really great results. Part of that downtown was, the reason I'm kind of tying in, was the convention center.
Mm-hmm.
It had gotten to be an eyesore,
Yeah.
and we were having a hard time bringing people in. And vibrant downtown needs a good convention center, and I think we did a great job with the money we had to really dress that up and,
Mm-hmm.
and do some things. And so that was important. Made some improvements at the Ranger Museum. Actually touched every library system, every library building. Found some space for the police.
Mm-hmm.
Able to buy that old tower when Hillcrest. I mean, we got a really good deal on that.
Yeah.
So we saved a lot of money there. And then the park. As far as I'm concerned, Cameron Park is part of our downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And it needed a lot of help.
Yeah.
We were able to spend about $12 million, I think, of the bond issue. Bond issue was around $63 million, in my memory. And so we carved out some for the Cameron Park and also neighborhood parks around. And I think the improvements we made at Cameron Park, then again, was another downtown amenity that when people come to do things, they're looking for those kind of amenities. And that really helped us. And I think it's just another little factor of people investing money. of seeing those opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this was investment around the centennial of the park.
Yes.
Yeah, that was 2011, I think, was the 100-year anniversary of William Cameron Park. And what sort of projects did y'all do? I know there's a lot done in the park, but what were some things that?
Well, we did several things in the bottoms. That's an area that people really enjoy. We fixed up redwood shelter. We did a lot of work on the points. That unfortunately we had some people that don't use their mind sometimes as they should, and trying to do things that are kind of crazy and got hurt. And we had to do something to try to keep that. You want people to enjoy. You don't want to look like a barricade, but so we did built some walls with rails and stuff, handrail kind of walls, and some lookout points, and I did some pretty neat things and made some real good improvements up what I call the north end, the entry from the north side.
Mm-hmm.
It was an old ballpark.
Was that park added then, the north side park or gateway?
Yes.
That was added with those improvements.
Yeah. So we stretched the money pretty good, and I think people have enjoyed it.
Well, I think your solution for the idiots falling off Lover's Leap, you can't say that, but I can. From folks falling off Lover's Leap was a creative solution because you still preserved a view.
Beautiful view.
By building up that berm where you can get an elevated view kind of the river, or you can go down and be by the fence if you want to.
Pretty neat.
I thought it was a creative solution.
Yeah.
So, and I think we've seen kind of visitorship of the park. That's something you'd be more familiar. I can just speak anecdotally about that, but it seems like the use of the park has increased.
It has
over that time period.
I would make a point of sometime during the day when I'm out, if I needed to go to that, that's the way I go.
Mm-hmm.
Go through the park and I look, and then just from a personal standpoint, several times I've taken family. They go up there and picnic, on a kind of a holiday kind of thing. Can't find a spot. I mean, I've driven every one, and sometimes it's just full, and that's so gratifying to go from almost no use to the kind of use it's getting now.
Yeah.
And people walk those trails. Unbelievable amount of people walk the trails.
Mm-hmm.
I took my grandsons down. We walked one day, and man, it just passing people coming and going. The mountain bikers. It's apparently an extremely high-rated mountain bike area.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a really mountain bike rider, but familiar with what they do, and frisbee golf, and it's just I tell you, our parks people are real creative, and if they see an opportunity to reach out and get people out in the environment and enjoying it, getting some exercise, and they come up with it and they do good.
Yeah, and you had long enough memory with it to know the time where families kind of abandoned Cameron Park. It just didn't have that sort of usership.
Yep, they did.
So it's
kind of sad.
Yeah.
But now you're seeing, that turning around. The river turned around. Downtown now is just unbelievable. I mean, I drive through on Austin Avenue, and it's just remarkable what's going on. And now that expansion of downtown towards Baylor, it's just all those old buildings they're filling in. People are finding uses and just jumping on things to do. Chip and Joanna, I mean, we can't thank them enough. I mean, they really, they've done a great job with the properties they have, even a greater job with bringing recognition to the city through their program. I'll never forget, they came in to see me about 2 years before the program started. And they wanted to tell me that they were going to do this program and they were going to make Waco look good. And they were telling me about what it was and HGTV, and I sat there and I didn't have a clue what they were talking about. I had worked with them in the past on some of the little development issues they had, and so they felt comfortable. Anyway, tell me all this stuff. And I was just saying, that sounds great. And I didn't know. I had no idea. And I'll be darned, 5 years later, their success was phenomenal. and they did everything they said they were going to do. That every episode, you wouldn't be putting down Waco on anything. It was always showing the best of Waco, and they did that.
Yeah.
And it changed. It changed for me when I was traveling. People find out I was from Waco. We quit talking about Mount Carmel, and we talked about Fixer Upper or whatever their real name is.
Yeah.
And they did a great job. Anyway, that whole area, I think, because of their influence, is just gone.
Yeah.
And then the second thing, I believe that really has helped that whole river area in downtown, McLean Stadium. Unbelievable what's going on there, and the things that are developing around it. And used to, people wouldn't even think about developing on the east side, and now you're just seeing, right across from City Hall, those things that are going up. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And then even in East Waco, across the bridge now, the development you see along Bridge Street, which
it's
is
just
pretty
great.
amazing.
It's great.
Well, I want to back up because, of course, with you talking about the Gaineses, I remember it was probably 10 years ago. I was driving through that area and I saw a sign that said Silo District, and I was like,
"What is this?"
All of a sudden, I'm in the Silo District. All of a sudden, I'm in the Silo District. But so. You talk about how change is slow, but then things start really picking up and moving quickly.
It does.
The pace really changes. But I want to go back and ask you, you mentioned kind of some small victories that happened along the way in downtown revitalization and maybe some other projects that you think were important. You talked about the cotton warehouses, those developments along there. Are there some others that you can think about that were kind of important?
Well,
getting that started.
Obviously, we already talked about opening up Austin.
Yeah,
I think that was a real big thing. Indian Springs Park was good. Those Heritage Square apartments on Washington, the bond projects that we talked about. Let me think. I guess. Well, and we helped revitalize the Hilton. The city actually put some money in it to kind of it had gotten kind of an eyesore, but not too bad. But just it just didn't look good.
It needed to be updated.
And so the update on that was really nice too.
And I mentioned I was doing interviews with Cullen Smith, the Freedom Fountain relocation there.
Yes.
By the city hall or by the convention center. Where to put that? I think of all the developments that happen along the river there in just a 20-year period, how much went in. Of course, we've got our new memorial, Doris Miller, across the way. We've got the Vietnam Veterans Memorial on this side, and all the things that happen along the river.
Those sculptures, they're pretty. I mean, there's just all those little things add up where it just improves the visitor experience so much. I mean, it's great for the citizens that live here, but when you have somebody coming in and they can do lots of different things, with the Ranger, with the Sports Hall of Fame, with the Dr. Pepper Museum, and then you walk along there, Riverwalk, you see those things that you mentioned. It just gives people a feeling that they want to come back. They want to go tell their neighbors, and that's what you want.
Well, I know you're involved, I think, in your first career with the city and helping do that initial Riverwalk project.
Yes. Down
by the river. It's just kind of interesting that as city manager, you're kind of back at the river, thinking about how to develop that with new walkway projects and new developments down by the river. The change of Baylor kind of finally crossing I-35, I think historically I-35, since it was constructed, was a little bit of a barrier.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But that's gone now.
Yeah, it's gone, and the investment they made on that old bank, I can't what it was, Guarantee Bank. Anyway, that was great. A lot of people there, and then the
Washington Avenue, the School of Social Work.
Social work, yeah. Is pretty good. It's just bringing people in, and that's what helps.
These so there's downtown revitalization. You mentioned the other projects that kind of come in with the bond issue. What was the vote on that bond issue? Do you remember?
It was overwhelming.
Yeah.
I mean, we had 5 issues, and all of them passed 70% plus, except the Ranger Museum. It was close. My analysis of it was, when I talked to different people, was they don't know why the city was putting money there. It's not ours. Mm-hmm. They didn't think it was fun. So we didn't do a good job of getting that message out in a lot of people's views. And so, but it still passed, so that was great.
So explain that. That's a big win. I mean, that's really a big win in 2007. So what do you credit that win to with getting those bond issues passed?
Failure is not an option. Actually,
you got to have more of a strategy than that.
Yeah. I think we did a great job involving the community. We had 10 different committees of citizens from all across the community, with 15 members on each committee, and kind of presented we had a $300 to $400 million list, and asked them to take this and pare it down to projects that they felt would be reasonable and have a good probability of passing. And they worked hard. I mean, we gave them all the information. We worked with them, but those committees and the chairs really worked hard. And unbelievably, they all came to pretty much the same conclusion. I mean, it was really, to me, it was kind of affirming that those 5 issues that we had was what we needed to do. And they came to that conclusion. Now, and you take those people, that 150 people, they all had friends. They all have influence. They talked about what they were doing, got that out. And so that was, to me, that was the groundwork. And then 2 guys that I credit heavily, Bill Clifton and Bill Nesbitt, both long-term Waco people, invested in the community. They went with me, and we went to anybody that would let us come talk. Every civic group. I mean, I should have a count somewhere, but man, we made the circuit, and I would present the projects, give all the information. I couldn't promote. You just can't do that against the law. But I would tell them everything, answer any technical questions, and then the bills would promote. And they invested a lot of time with me. And I think, again, we probably, I say conservatively, touched another 500, 700 people easy, maybe more. Yeah. And they have contacts, And what's good is you're going to those people, they're in those community groups because they're vested in the community and they want to see the community do good. And so they're all of a sudden you got these ambassadors that are out. And I think that's my mind as I look back on it, that's why we were successful.
Did the priorities that the committees come up with, did they match what you were thinking as far
Pretty
as?
much.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. I would have liked to seen some drainage work because we've got some huge drainage issues. Some of it comes right down through Baylor. But, it's hard to sell drainage. It's not quite like a park,
Even as you said it, Larry, I yawned.
I know. I mean, I was worried about police. I mean, because sometimes people think, oh, that's a government. They just need to do that. Like we got some money that comes from somewhere. I mean, everything is taxpayer. I mean, it's just the citizens through property taxes, through sales taxes, through fees. I mean, it's our money, and so that was always important to me that we spend every dollar right.
When you mentioned drainage issues, I thought of Barron's Branch.
Barron's Branch.
Yeah, so which. If you're new to Waco, you don't know what I'm talking about. But that little drainage area on the way toward Cameron Park, kind of across from the
4th and 5th Street.
Yeah, between 4th and 5th Street. That was a real problem for you, right?
It was. Yeah, it was.
Do you mind talking about that? Maybe it's just for me, but do you mind talking about that a little bit?
You talking about where we had to replace the
it was
pipe arch?
Well, and if you look at historical maps of Waco, there's a creek there.
Yeah, there's a creek there, and it's basically covered up. They put a pipe arch in. I mean, it's big, like 17 foot. I mean, it's a huge thing. We drive vehicles down in it. And it went out to the river from, I guess, 4th Street. It was metal, galvanized metal. Over time, that started having problems. And we started seeing it. We started seeing some problems with it. And so, I was trying to come up with some fixes. But the only fix really to replace it. So we ended up, replacing that. And now it's in good shape.
Yeah.
So
it looks great now.
So it's concrete, so it'll last for a long time.
Well, it reminds me in smaller scale of the drainage we have here on campus of Waco Creek.
Waco Creek, yeah. So Waco Creek, unfortunately, people love to build by creeks. I mean, people love water. They really do. And so you just build as close as you can. Well, as that development kept occurring, you just get more impermeable surface, so the water can't be absorbed, and it's just rushing faster. And so these drainage peaks get up, and then all of a sudden you start flooding houses. And we have that. And so there's still a lot to be done. But, for me, I had two things. I already told you, failure's not an option. Second is we have to do all these projects. They have to be great. People have to see it, and they have to be proud that they were part of it and paying their taxes, such that 5 years, 10 years, whenever the time's right, you go back.
Yeah.
Because there's always needs. And if you can go back and promote some projects and remind people what we did before, and they weren't bad, where they weren't failures, then it's a whole lot easier because the confidence has been developed. So.
Yeah, and I think that's the case. I mean, you think about all those projects; they're pretty high-profile, successful projects. So, the other thing that you're involved in that I wanted to ask about was the Mammoth site.
Okay,
we're leaving downtown there, but I know that there's a lot going on with the Mammoth site. Whereas a lot didn't happen for a long time, there's a lot happening during this period with the Mammoth site. And can you talk about kind of the city's engagement with that?
Sure. We didn't engage too much. Baylor really was taking the lead on that. Once those two guys saw the bones and came down here and got Calvin Smith involved, and Baylor went out and started excavating and had volunteers, and it really didn't want people to know too much about it because it wasn't really secure. And but they took out a lot of bones, of course, mapped them all, and everything's recorded and they're stored.
Yeah.
In Baylor facilities. Mabry Museum, and then Sam Jack McGlasson gave the 5 acres where he owned it. I don't know, I'm not sure when he acquired it, but he gave it to the city with the stipulation that we would continue working with Baylor. So he actually was the one that tied the city and Baylor together.
Okay. And
so now that we owned it, we started engaging a little bit more, and I got to be good friends with Calvin. And we got some tents put up, and he was a scrounger. I mean, he found ways to get things done and got contractors to give him backhoes. Anyway, but just slowly working it. But it still needed to be protected, and so I started getting involved. I guess when I was assistant city manager. Actually, I got involved when I was at the zoo because we saw a natural tie. I had this grandiose vision that we would develop this mammoth site, and then we would acquire, and we acquired 100 acres around it, and where we'd put our elephants. So in a larger area.
Okay.
And then people could see and draw comparisons between the elephants and the mammoths.
More of a wildlife park, sort of.
Yeah. Well, that grandiose thing never came out of me. But anyway, that was kind of my idea. I thought that'd be great. So anyway, I was kind of working from the zoo standpoint, and then I continued working as assistant city manager, just trying to help the site stay secure. And then luckily, at that time, we started thinking about talking to national parks and see what we could do to get that, because I just knew that if we could get that designated as a national park, not only would they come in with great stuff, get the airhead out there and be on their list, and it would just be another wonderful tourist attraction. And that took a long time, but we finally got there, as you know. But anyway, again, a group of interested citizens got together, formed a committee. We formed a Mammoth Foundation and had people working. We started raising money and built that first structure with some infrastructure that we needed. So again, you spend a lot on infrastructure, but it got master plans on what can be done. So it's all laid out, and it'll slowly get there. And we had the foresight to get the national parks involved early on. So as we designed it, the people that were designing it for us, we did it to national park standards. So if it ever became, then there wasn't a whole lot of correction to be made.
Yeah.
And we got the national parks staff people pretty excited. They really thought it was pretty neat. And so we made lots of efforts, to get it as a park, which is really hard to do. So we finally went after the monument, which is a little bit easier. I made 4 or 5 trips to D.C., which I hate to go to D.C. It just anyway, talking to different committees about the project, trying to get it funded, and we did get some money for the resource study. That was kind of the first step. Chet Edwards helped us get that, and I talked myself a lot to those guys and didn't really get anywhere. But after I left, it was finally designated, through the Antiquities Act, I believe, as a monument. And so we got all that designation. We're not getting a whole lot of money from them, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think they have some staff out there. I think they have a paleontologist out there now. So it's coming along. But getting that designation was just huge.
Yeah.
Really huge. And I think there's a lot of people that worked real hard. Those kind of things just don't happen overnight.
No.
One person doesn't do it. It's typical. Everything is a team effort. If you're gonna get anything done, you just got to get a bunch of people lined up heading the same direction.
Well, that's a theme in your career. You just, as we keep coming back to about mobilizing citizens that are invested and interested, and things can get done. And sometimes it takes a while. I think of that Mammoth site, where Texas is kind of national park poor. So, I mean, we
in some ways.
Yeah.
Really, even, Texas and some of the Southeast is poor, right?
Yeah.
My wife and I have we go to national parks. We just love to go to national parks every chance we get. If we're going to go somewhere, we're going to see what they are, and our goal is to hit every one. And when you get them plotted, we've gotten all the easy ones. We went to California a few years ago, and there's a lot on the West Coast all the way up, and we hit a lot of those. And Utah, is just wonderful. It's just got park after park. But then you get in our area and through the Southeast, there's just not a lot. And Alaska's got a lot, so that's going to be a good trip one of these days. So it was nice to get another designation in Texas.
Yeah. This period where you're city manager, you can think of what other city managers face in their position, but we talked about the challenges of Waco, particularly downtown economically, but one thing you had that a lot of other city managers may not have had as much of was capacity.
Yes.
And I think we're still experiencing that.
Yes.
in many respects, this capacity for either adaptive reuse or new construction and new development, or just capacity to develop.
Yeah. As horrible as that tornado was in '53, it cleaned out a lot of areas,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that just had to be destroyed. And they sat there for a long time, but as you said, they're available. So you got the land, we have water, we have a great community.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's getting to be a much easier sell than it was 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I experience it anecdotally. You must experience it all the time of people just the way people talk about Waco as a place, you know, as far as a destination
Right.
place. Or
It's gratifying.
yeah, it's got to be. And I'm hoping you stand up a little straighter and
Well.
a little bit of that's yours, Larry. I think you need to take credit for that.
Well,
Yeah.
as I said, it's just a lot of folks.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, a lot of times everything just has to be aligned. Timing has to be right.
Mm-hmm.
And some people willing to take some risk.
Well, how'd you last that long?
You know, I don't know. One of the things that I learned pretty quick is the power of listening.
Mm-hmm.
And you're working for 6 people, sometimes with the variety of opinions about things done, and somehow you have just to listen and get a group consensus. And then once you get it, you know, just go get it done. And that was kind of my route. But we talked early on. I still think a lot of my success was just due to long-term relationship building. People that felt comfortable with you, had confidence in you, and would support you. And I just always felt like I had tremendous support in the community, even in some of the tough things. You know, when you're doing landfills or that treatment plant. I mean, that gets kind of tough. But all in all, the majority knows it's the right thing to do, and we were going to get it done.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think about those relationships when I think about your retirement gift. And Randy would want me to ask about your retirement gift. So what did you get as a retirement gift?
Well, I tell people I got a lot of loot. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was overwhelming, the way people turned out and brought gifts and thoughts, you know, just reminding me of things. You know, that for me, it's funny how when you're doing things, you do things and you don't really think about it too much. But the person that's being affected, it means a lot to them. Mm-hmm. And so one of the best things I got was just a lot of cards. Just saying, do you remember when you did such and such? You know, that really changed. So that was gratifying. Mm-hmm. But and then just lots of presents. But the one that Randy talked about is they decorated the event in a Harley theme. At the time, Deaver was on the council, and he and his brother John owned the Harley dealership, and so it was pretty easy for so they brought out and had about 5 or 6 Harleys up along the podium area, you know, just sitting there and people looking at them, and so I thought, hey, this is neat. And I'm sitting there and Jim Hawkins gets up and starts talking about it and says, Larry, why don't you go pick out one of these bikes? Here's you some keys. Go pick out the one you want. And they knew which one I'd pick. I mean, Kyle knew for sure. And he said, go see if it crank up. So I took those keys and cranked up myself. And I'm sitting there, they're giving this to me? And at the time, I didn't know who was giving it to me. But I couldn't believe it. I mean, the next morning, I still couldn't believe it. So I knew Jim Hawkins had kind of helped along with Kyle and several other people. So I said, I want to know. I got to know who all contributed to this. So they got me the list, and it was 20 plus business guys that I had developed relationships with for many years, and they just decided to get together and give that to me. And boy, I was proud of it, and I still think about it and just think about how nice that was. I mean, for those guys to do something like that they didn't have to, but they wanted to do it.
Well, our Harley people are going to wonder what it was, so you have to tell them.
Oh, it's a top of the line ultra classic, big street touring bike. Pretty neat bike. Mm-hmm. In fact, I took it on a trip. I'd always had in my mind when I retired, there was a trip I wanted to do, and that was to go around the United States. And so as soon as I got through with my house, I took off in late July, early August, and by myself, and I just rode. I went to Florida, up to Maine, over to Washington State, down to California, and back to Texas. Went through 34 states. Didn't stop. I mean, I just rode, stopped for eating, stopped for gas, and just rode. And did about 4 miles less than 8,000 miles on that bike. And did it in 11 days. So I was hauling. I'd average over 700 miles a day. So.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. So what was that like?
Oh, it's great. I mean, it just I don't know how to describe this sometimes, people, but it did two things for me. It gave me a much greater nationalistic pride.
Mm-hmm.
Every state. We've traveled a lot, but I hadn't done it that, all at once kind of. And every state has some beautiful things to offer, just natural beauty. And then seeing the investment, the development all around just made me feel proud. And God, that no matter what the challenge was, we can take it on.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing it did, and probably more importantly, was a spiritual revival. I felt renewed. Just seeing God's handiwork is just unbelievable. That's why I like national parks, I think, because you just see that, and you just see it mile after mile after mile. Unbelievable. And all the people that I engaged along the way were just great.
Mm-hmm.
Every state. So
yeah. That's interesting.
Pretty neat.
You can enjoy the built environment because, you obviously built a career thinking about the built environment, but enjoying the natural environment too. That's amazing.
Very neat.
Yeah.
The bike was wonderful. It was just comfortable. I feel more comfortable in it than I do in a car. It's pretty good.
How were the elements?
Well, it started out pretty good. I tried to pick a time when I didn't. You don't want to ride in the rain too much. I really was pretty lucky. I only got rained on maybe twice. The temperature was a little warm in the south, got really great as I got up north. And then I got over into Oregon and was in the mountains and stopped at a little place that was just unbelievable. It's a story in itself, but no air conditioning. It was just like a little lodge, and actually gave you keys, and it was pretty old, and no air conditioning. You just open the windows, and when I got there, it was warm enough to open the windows. When I woke up, it's 42 degrees, and I didn't have a lot of heavy. When I took off, I was cold. I had my rain suit on, and every piece of clothes I had I was on, and I was still cold. It wasn't until 10:30 or 11 when the sun really got up that I started warming up. So that was kind of from an element standpoint, that was kind of the low. And then coming back, man, I came back down, and coming through West Texas, it was 106 degrees. It was boiling. So I had quite a range of temperatures. So I was glad to get back home by the time I got there.
Did you plan out your stops, or you just stopped when you got tired?
I stopped, yeah. Just when I stopped trying to find some place to stop. And sometimes it was a little longer than others. And when I got tired, stopped to eat when I was hungry. Yeah. Stopped to fill up gas. So.
Yeah. Well, what an amazing trip.
It's a good trip.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, I want to make sure we didn't miss anything. Were there some things that I should have asked you about that I didn't ask you about?
No.
We covered a lot of ground.
I think we covered it pretty good, and went back a couple of times, and, because it kind of mingles in there. But, no, it was good. It was a great career for me. I never, for me, I never dreamed of the opportunities that I had all through the work for the city, as city engineer and a zoo and as city manager, just pretty remarkable. Mm-hmm. So I treasure all of it.
Can you turn it off? We talked about before we were recording all your projects you have going now, so you're still managing a lot of projects.
I keep pretty busy. Yeah, I know some people have trouble retiring. I didn't. It was really, the first day I woke up, not having a phone ringing all the time and emails and texts was kind of nice. I enjoyed that. The thing that I miss the most is the interaction with people.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, you work with people. I worked with some people for 30 years, and you're really with them more than you're with your folks at home.
Yeah.
When you think about it,
Yeah.
you're in more concentrated hours, waking hours. And so you just have a lot of great friends that you try to keep those alive, but it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the biggest thing. The work, I haven't missed at all.
Mm-hmm.
I like seeing Waco continue to thrive, and I enjoyed reading about the successes, and reading about some of the tough things. It's well, I'm not having to do that, but it's good. It's good. We just have people. All through my career, I think people have appreciated, and I think they used to appreciate it more when I first started. Now they're a little more demanding, but we really have been fortunate having great people work for the city,
Mm-hmm.
talented, technologically sound,
Mm-hmm.
and just do good jobs. I mean, they just did a good job,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm proud of that, and I'm proud they're doing that. But I think sometimes people don't realize that, but they're great folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for your service to the city of Waco.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it's we I know I benefited from it daily, and a lot of people do, but they don't realize they do. Yeah, I'm gonna go have a glass of water right after this.
Tastes good. Yeah, I've gotten kind of dry.
Thanks, Larry.
Okay, thank you.
Cross the Brazos and Waco, ride hard and I'll make it by dawn.
Thanks for listening to the Waco History Podcast. Like what you heard? Subscribe, rate, and review our show on iTunes so we can reach more listeners. You can find show notes and info on every episode at wacohistorypodcast.com, and more info on Waco's past at wacohistory.org. Our theme music, used with permission, is Cross the Brazos at Waco, performed by the late Billy Walker. For more info on Billy's music, go to billywalker.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
I'm safe when I reach San Antonio.
This has been a Rogue Media Network podcast.